brake checking a problem we need to deal with? Let's get into it. Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're talking about brake checking. Now brake checking is one of those things that people like to complain about it at the same time as they love to be able to use it. And nowadays with pushback bumpers, people are feeling like it is much more of an issue. Now first off, I want to specify that I'm not talking about jamming on the brakes in a straightaway or a fast corner. That's just attempted murder-suicide. Don't do that stuff. And if you're an official like me, make sure you're punishing that stuff pretty harshly. Now what I'm talking about is skillfully using defensive driving in through the center of a corner using either delayed throttle or additional brake pressure to essentially force the driver behind you to break momentum. So what we're going to look at is, number one, is it a problem? Number two, is it illegal? And if it is, how do we get officials to deal with it? Brake checking comes in two flavors. The first is essentially delaying throttle in the center of a corner as you approach center of the corner, where normally you'd be accelerating away, and you delay that so that the driver behind you has to check up and, they can't get a run on you. The other version is a little more aggressive, wherein the driver actually, gets on the binders a little bit in the center of the corner or approaching the center of the corner to essentially accomplish the same thing. Like any form of defense, like any skill in karting, it is one of those things that you have to know how to do it properly to do it effectively. Now, many modern day karting series use pushback bumpers, and a lot of drivers are complaining that there is brake checking happening on the starts. Now, first and foremost, the front row in every rulebook that I use and or have dealt with in my racing career says that the pole sitter must maintain a steady pace. Now, if the pole sitter is brake checking the field and packing everybody up, that is not a steady pace. Now, I've had complaints sometimes about certain drivers like to speed up and slow down, and we try to use a bit of discretion in those situations, but if a pole sitter is causing activations, then that is a problem and they should be penalized appropriately for it. But activations on starts tend to happen from the driver's fault in the first place. As a driver, you are responsible for taking care of your equipment, and if you're ramming into people on the formation lap before you even get to the formation line, or even long before you get close to the acceleration point, whether it be a zone or a line, that is entirely on you. I mean, what are you doing? And as for drivers that tend to complain that we're on top of each other on the start, so there's nothing we can do about it, you have the steering wheel in your hand and the pedals at your feet. You are in control. And if you're in a field that you want to be bumped up, right up against the cart in front of you, you are making that choice. And you also have control over dragging your brakes when you get on throttle and not. But I think effective starting is something that I'll get into in another video because I am astonished at some of the starts that I see these days. I've got lots of video of starts. But once the race is underway, brake checking takes on a whole different game. It is something that is usually simply used as a defensive measure to keep somebody behind you from getting a run out of the corner into the next passing zone. As I said, delaying throttle, getting in through the center of the corner, or tapping the brakes in the center of the corner to break that momentum. So, is it illegal? No rulebook that I use or raced under specifically called out brake checking. Now, you might want to reach into the rules and say it's unsportsmanlike, but if it's an effective move that isn't particularly dangerous, then what's unsportsmanlike about it? And as for safety, it is incredibly rare for a delayed throttle or even a mid-corner brake check to actually cause a crash. Usually all that happens is the driver behind that hasn't timed their corner properly, anticipating that that driver's going to try and break their momentum, makes contact with the driver in front, and they both drive away. In particularly bad situations, you might have a bumper activation. Can brake checking be dangerous? Absolutely it can be. High-speed corners, somebody really jamming on the brakes, something that's much easier to catch. Those are situations where race officials have to be able to make a call. And there's always options in the rulebook that you can use in those situations to punish that kind of behavior. But in most corners where the driver's trying to break the momentum of the driver behind them, and the driver behind them has the opportunity to not make contact by simply using their brake pedal, it doesn't matter that they don't want to use the brake pedal. Really, the only rule that I think you could find that exists in most rule books is going to say something along the lines of avoidable contact. Now, avoidable contact is usually strictly used for front-rear contact, where the driver behind hits the driver in front. Usually, the penalty only applies if they actually gain an advantage or cause a serious disadvantage to the driver that they hit, or if it's repeated. But avoidable contact is one of those things where the driver causing the contact is in full control of whether or not contact happens. They simply don't hit the brake going into the corner, they intentionally blow the braking zone, and intentionally go in and make contact. It can also be applied to somebody who's, done it by accident, but still caused a disadvantage to another driver because you're supposed to be in control. There are always gray zones in situations like that, but that's typically how we make that call. So tapping the brake, maybe you could make an argument that they were trying to intentionally create a situation where contact was going to happen. But delaying throttle? Can anybody here point to a rule book that says where in a corner the driver is responsible to hit the throttle? Rulebooks don't mandate what a racing line looks like. They don't mandate where the braking points are. They don't mandate where the throttle points are. Therefore, a driver is in full control to make the decision of when to accelerate and when not. A driver jamming on the brakes in the center of a straightaway is creating a dangerous situation. I can go with that. Driver jamming on the brakes in the center of a corner coming to a stop. Sure, I could go with that. But a driver trying to break momentum in the center of a corner, when they don't cause crashes and the driver behind is in full control of their cart and has the ability to hit their own brake pedal, now you've got a difficult situation. But even then, let's say you go with avoidable contact. You're saying that the driver in front intentionally created a situation for contact. Now you've got the last piece of the puzzle that you got to put together. How do you know? For a race official standing at the side of the racetrack, how do you know that the driver in front actually hit the brakes and didn't just delay throttle? There's blind parts in corners. Sometimes they're going away from you. Even when they're going towards you, you can't always tell when they're hitting the brake. I mean, if you're dragging the brake into the corner anyway, a minor addition to brake pressure, you're never going to see it from the outside. And saying that, oh, you can tell, can you though? Can you really tell the difference between somebody delaying throttle and somebody hitting the brake? Without actually having telemetry, how are race officials actually supposed to call somebody for brake checking? Now, a lot of people these days have cameras on their car, which is great. And you can make the argument that that person in front slowed down or didn't accelerate when they were expected to. But again, there is no rule that says a driver has to accelerate at a certain point in the corner. Now, understand that I am not advocating for drivers to go out there and start jamming on the brakes. Delaying throttle in a corner or applying additional brake pressure in the corner to break that momentum is a tactic. It's part of defensive driving. And until it comes into a situation where it was clearly dangerous, you're actually in a very difficult situation expecting race officials to make that call. To be able to recognize that the driver physically, intentionally slowed down in the center of the corner with the brakes to cause contact versus the driver slowing down in the center of the corner to force the driver behind him to hit the brakes. Remember, they've got brakes too to try and avoid contact. Braking momentum is a skill. Now, the driver behind is not completely helpless in these situations either. In a corner, when you're trying to set somebody up for a pass, you have to anticipate that in the last couple of laps, they're probably already driving defensive anyway. You need to figure out how to take advantage of that. And I have seen highly skilled drivers making passes on drivers who try to run defensive through the center of the corner. They're hitting the brakes. They're delaying throttle. They are handing you an opportunity to pass them into the next corner if you know how to maintain your momentum through that same corner behind them without making contact, without having to back out. It's called Racecraft. Being a good driver is the skill of driving quickly. Racecraft is using the skill of driving quickly, but also the skill of understanding when to and when not to make passes, how to make passes out of bad situations. And that's something that you need to learn. But I don't know. Tell me what you think. Do you think that brake checking is a much bigger problem than I'm giving it credit for? Do you think series should have brake checking in the rulebook? Do you think the officials should have better tools so that they can make those kinds of calls? Let me know down in the comments. Get down there and like and subscribe, make comments. I want to give a shout out to everybody who's come on board lately and who's been watching the videos. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll have many more videos to come. Let me know if there's any particular subjects that you want me to get into, and we'll talk about it. But until then, as always, I will see you at the racetrack.